Archiving history. Let's explore.
In the high valleys of the Pacific Northwest, where mist drifts through the pines and the Wallowa Mountains rise like ancient sentinels, there lived a people who called themselves Nimiipuu, we the people. They had lived in those lands for countless generations, fishing the salmon-rich rivers, tending their herds of horses, and following the rhythms of the earth. The world, however, would come to know them by another name, Nez Perce, pierced nose, a label given by early French fur traders who mistook them for another tribe. It was never their own name, yet in time it became the one history recorded. Among the Nimiipuu was a young man born to leadership and faith, Himatawi Alakwi, thunder rolling down the mountain. The world would remember him by the name Chief Joseph. He was born in 1840, son of a respected leader known as Old Joseph. His father had signed a treaty with the United States in 1855 that allowed the Nez Perce to retain a vast portion of their ancestral land, stretching from the Wallowa Valley of Oregon, deep into the Bitterroot Mountains of Idaho and beyond. But only 8 years later, in 1863, a new treaty, the so-called Steel Treaty, was forced upon them. It slashed the Nez Perce land to a fraction of its original size, leaving the Wallowa Valley, the heart of their homeland, in white hands. Old Joseph refused to sign. He tore up the treaty and declared,
"This country holds your father's body. Never sell the bones of your father and your mother."
When Old Joseph died, the promise fell to his son. Chief Joseph vowed to keep his people in the Wallowa, despite the growing tide of settlers, miners, and soldiers that pressed in around them. He was not a man of war, but a man of peace. Yet peace, in the face of expansion, was a fragile dream. By 1877, the U.S. government's patience had run out. General Oliver O. Howard ordered all non-treaty Nez Perce bands, those who had refused to move to the Lapwai Reservation in Idaho, to leave the Wallowa and relocate. The government gave them 30 days to abandon the only home they had ever known. Joseph knew resistance meant bloodshed, so he gathered his people, about 800 in all, including women and children, and began the long journey east toward the reservation. But along the way, tragedy struck. A group of young Nez Perce men, enraged by years of injustice, killed several white settlers near Whitebird Canyon. The fragile peace shattered. War had come, and Joseph, though he had not sought it, was now the leader of a nation at war. The conflict that followed was unlike any in American history. It was not a war of conquest, it was a flight for survival. Facing 5 converging U.S. Army columns, the Nez Perce began one of the most extraordinary retreats ever recorded, a 1,400-mile journey across the rugged spine of the American Northwest. They crossed the Bitterroot Mountains, fought brilliant rearguard actions at Whitebird Canyon and Big Hole, and slipped through Yellowstone, pursued constantly, yet never crushed. The Nez Perce warriors, outnumbered and outgunned, repeatedly outmaneuvered seasoned U.S. troops. Even their pursuers, like Colonel John Gibbon and General Howard, marveled at their skill, discipline, and humanity. For the Nez Perce often spared prisoners, tended the wounded, and refused to descend into cruelty. As they traveled, word of their courage spread across the nation. Newspapers called Chief Joseph the Red Napoleon. Others compared his eloquence and restraint to that of the great statesman of history. But for Joseph, there was no glory. Only exhaustion, sorrow, and the constant burden of protecting his people. Their goal was Canada, where Sitting Bull and the Lakota had found refuge after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. If the Nez Perce could reach the border, they would be beyond the reach of the U.S. Army. For 4 months they pressed on, through heat, storms, and hunger, always pursued, always fighting. By October 1877, they had come within 40 miles of the Canadian frontier, near the cold plains of Bear Paw Mountain in northern Montana. But there, surrounded by General Nelson Miles's troops, the Nez Perce could go no farther. For 5 days they fought desperately in the snow and wind. Many of their leaders, including Joseph's brother Olcott, killed. The cold was merciless. The children were dying, and with the enemy closing in, Joseph faced an unbearable choice: fight to the last man and see his people annihilated, or surrender and save those who remained. On October 5, 1877, Chief Joseph rode forward to surrender. Wrapped in a blanket, exhausted and heartbroken, he delivered one of the most haunting speeches in American history, words still remembered today.
Tell General Howard I know his heart. What he told me before, I have it in my heart. I am tired of fighting. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. Tahu Hushu is dead. The old men are all dead. It is the young men who say yes or no. He who led the young men is dead. It is cold, and we have no blankets. The little children are freezing to death. My people, some of them, have run away to the hills and have no blankets, no food. No one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. Want to have time to look for my children and see how many I can find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead. Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more, forever.
With those words, Joseph laid down his rifle. The war was over, but his people's suffering was not. The U.S. government promised that the Nez Perce would be returned to their homeland in Idaho. Instead, they were sent in chains to Kansas and later Indian Territory, modern-day Oklahoma, a hot, disease-ridden land alien to them. Hundreds died of malaria, starvation, and despair. Joseph wrote letters to Washington, pleading for justice, eloquent appeals that reached the highest levels of government and the American press. He became a symbol of dignity and endurance, admired even by those who had once called him enemy.
I believe much trouble and blood would be saved if we opened our hearts more,
He wrote. After years of lobbying, Joseph and the survivors were finally allowed to return to the Northwest in 1885, but not to their beloved Wallowa. Instead, they were sent to the Colville Reservation in Washington, far from the valleys of their birth. There, Joseph lived out his final years as a leader in exile, a man of peace among the remnants of a broken people. Chief Joseph died in 1904, far from the homeland he had fought to protect. The doctor who examined him said he died of a broken heart. But Joseph's spirit never truly left the mountains and rivers of the Wallowa. His words, preserved in newspapers, journals, and oral tradition, echo with a rare purity of conscience and conviction. He had fought not for conquest but for survival, not for glory but for the simple right to live as his ancestors had lived. Today, Chief Joseph stands as one of the greatest moral figures of the 19th century, not because he wielded power, but because he refused to let it corrupt him. He fought a war he did not start, and surrendered with more dignity than his enemies ever showed him. Monuments and parks now bear his name. The Wallowa Valley, once taken from his people, is remembered as sacred ground, and his words, still read in classrooms and memorials, continue to challenge America's conscience. For Native Americans, Joseph remains a symbol of what it means to lead with integrity and compassion, even in defeat. For all people, his story endures as a reminder that true strength is not the absence of suffering. It is the refusal to surrender one's humanity in the face of it. He lost a homeland, yes, but he gained immortality. He taught the world that even in conquest, there can be grace. Even in surrender, there can be courage. And even when the world takes everything, the land, the freedom, the future, the spirit of a people can still stand unbroken beneath the rising sun. Would you like to learn more? Check out our website and subscribe at archivinghistory.com.